There is nothing new about fake news. Once upon a time, it was called yellow journalism, a phrase coined back in the late 1800s to denote journalism that presented eye-catching headlines and no to little research stories which may or may not have been true. Legitimate news operations once tried to be very hard not to be yellow, but it didn't always work. Perhaps the most famous example was the Washington Post reporting on an 8-year-old heroin addict. It won the paper a Pulitzer. Unfortunately, the trouble was that story was completely made up. The reporter discredited and the paper returned the Pulitzer. Now compare that to Rolling Stone and its infamous story, A Rape on Campus, a story which was also totally made up. The publication defended the story, defended the reporter, even defended the editorial practices which allowed the story to be published, even as it was forced to remove it from the website, apologize, and pay millions in defamation claims, pushing it to the edge of bankruptcy. Instead of being reprimanded, the media appears emboldened. Take, for example, a newspaper published story about tens of thousands of fraudulent ballots that were found in a warehouse in Ohio. It went viral and millions read the story. The story was not true. Another website ran a story about how former Milwaukee County Sheriff David Clark was a member of the Ku Klux Klan. 500,000 people read that story, but it turns out the black sheriff is not a member. Or how about the even more recent Time magazine story about how President Trump removed the statue of Martin Luther King from the White House? Demonstrably not true. And so we come to Michael Wolff in his book Fire and Fury, who admits he said whatever was necessary to gain access to the White House. New York Times White House reporter Maggie Haberman has said, quote, he creates a narrative that is notionally true, that's conceptually true. The details are often wrong. Washington Post reporter Mark Berman says the story included in the book about him is, quote, 100% wrong. Welcome back to the new journalism, or the nude, that's N-U-D-E journalism, as the editor of the New York Press described it in the 1890s.
Yes, in the 1890s, and I guarantee you everything you just heard there was true. In fact, I'll stand behind it and guarantee it. Joining us now to talk about the media bias and the way journalism is going today is Newsmax TV host Reverend Jesse Lee Peterson. He is a host on Newsmax, and you can catch his show weekdays at 9 a.m. Eastern here on the network. Reverend Jesse Lee, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Bill. Happy New Year to you and Ed and your families and everyone else.
Oh, thank you so much. That's right. We haven't spoken to you since last year. Happy New Year to you, too.
It's been a long time, way last year.
Yeah, no kidding. Let's what make you? I mean, let's dive deeper into this story. Everybody's talking about media bias as if it were something recent. It is, in fact, as the piece points out, not the case. But we do seem to have a journalism ethic now that it's like if it gets the headline, if it gets the clicks, if it baits you into getting to that story and it gets the reads, it's okay.
Yeah. Well, you know, society is not the same as it was 50 to 60 years ago. We used to be, for the most part, upright society. Morality came before anything else. And whenever you have virtue, you tend to be careful at what you listen to, what you watch, what you do. But because of the destruction of the family, the liberals taking over and removing God from the public square, removing him from the homes by destroying the families, and then brainwashing young people in the universities around the country, morality is out the window. And now people, not all, of course, are motivated by excitement, and bad news or gossip or news like that tend to excite people.
Yeah, no. Well, and Ed, you could probably address this. Actually, you're a former editor-in-chief of a magazine. The pressures are real.
30 years ago, Bill, 30 years ago, A.M. Rosenthal ran the New York Times,
right.
And he said, and I'm quoting him, to reporters, I don't care if you cover the circus, but you can't sleep with the elephants, by which he meant you cannot forget that you need to be objective in your sourcing and make sure that you get it right. And he kept the paper straight while he was there. Ever since he's gone, the paper has gone way over left, along with the rest of the mainstream media.
Well, I think it's most of the media. I mean, and honestly, this was something you and I were talking about, and Jesse, you can weigh on this as well. I mean, there used to be copy editors, so that when a reporter filed a story, whether it was in print or for television, it had to go through a row of editors who checked it for facts, for bias, and add that little institution called a copy editor, which protected the public in so many ways,
and there were
doesn't really exist.
Levels of editors too that you had to go through, not just one or two, but sometimes 3 and 4.
Yeah, Jesse.
Well, you know, another thing too. Up until now, the public had no way of really knowing what the media was doing behind the scene. You know, because of President Trump, the Great White Hope, and the fact that he is tweeting out what's really going on with him and what the media is doing, we are now getting an inside look on an inside look as to what the media is really doing to deceive us. And I think because we are starting to wake up to that, we might see things start to change with the media. After a while, I think that they're going to become more honest, or otherwise they will go out of business.